Hey guys, before you enjoy the rest of the video, I just wanted to take a moment to say that if you ever felt the need to support me monetarily or want to show any sort of support in that way, you can hit the donate button or the link to my PayPal account and donate however much you want. I do these blogs and these video podcasts free of charge, of course, so I'm just throwing that out there if you want to. I'm not trying to influence you in any way, but if you want to show your appreciation that way, feel free. And if not, that's cool. I'm going to keep doing these videos. And having said that, I'm going to let you enjoy the rest of this video podcast.
One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours, it will be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure, we will be sure. Oh, glory, glory, glory. Oh.
Hands to the heavens, no man, no weapon formed against, yes, glory is destined. Everyday women and men become legends. Sins that go against our skin become blessings. The movement is a rhythm to us. Freedom is like religion to us. Justice is juxtaposition in us. Justice for all just ain't specific enough. One son died, his spirit is revisiting us. True and living in us. Resistance is us. That's why Rosa sat on the bus. That's why we walk through Ferguson with our hands up. When it go down, we woman and man up. They say stay down, and we stand up. Shots we on the ground, the camera panned up. King pointed to the mountaintop, and we ran up.
One day, when the glory comes, it will be ours, it will be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure, we will be sure. Oh, glory, glory, glory. Oh.
And here we are with another video. So let's see. This video is a subject that I'm gonna be honest with you. I've avoided talking about this on my blog for a number of reasons. Number one, because unlike the extremist left, I don't like to I avoid entertaining speculation. Number one, and number two, context is everything to me when it comes to news reports. And most importantly, I hate bandwagons in general. This video is about the Black Lives Matter movement and the All Lives Matter movement. I consider them one and the same personally. First, let's look at the facts. Have a lot of African American men been? Well, actually, let me revise that. Have some African American men have ended up getting killed at the hands of white police officers? Yes, and have except for maybe two of those instances, have those police officers have not been charged or indicted or have been considered deemed legally responsible for the deaths of those African Americans? Yes. That said, like I said at the beginning, context is everything. You can't take all of these different instances together and just brush a broad brush. Am I saying that there are I'm not saying that there are not racist pigs out there. I'm not saying that at all. And yes, I am going to use that phrase. However, the vast majority of law enforcement out there are good, honest cops. And in my opinion, we should assume innocence. We live in a nation of laws, and of course, some of the laws in this country are pretty fucked up and meant to favor some groups over another, but At the end of the day, we shouldn't demonize all cops because of the actions of a very small number of them. That's the point. I want to say that first and foremost. So that when my video is scrutinized later on, I have people saying all cops are bad. That's not what I'm saying at all. So now we're going to go over. I'm going to go over three recent incidents involving African American men that have been killed while in the custody of law enforcement. We're going to back up a bit with the most recent, and I'm doing a whole hand gestures thing to help paint a full picture. But anyway, Freddie Gray. That's been very well televised and very well documented. So I really don't see the need to reiterate and regurgitate the facts. But just to overview once more, we know that he was arrested. He was arrested under very questionable circumstances. We know that his death was contributed to the ride in the van and lots of other stuff that we just, honestly, I don't think we'll ever know. We have enough evidence to know that his death was caused partially because of the ride, but also because of how he was handled and all that. We also know that in America in general, it is not a crime to walk away if you are not being arrested. If you are not told that you are being arrested, it is not a crime to walk away because you're in fear of your life from law enforcement. I mean, let me interject there a bit and just repeat something that a professor that I had at a couple years ago gave to us as sort of a end of the term wisdom. If you ever get stopped by the police, the first thing you should ask if they start questioning you is, "Am I being arrested?" If the answer is no, you ain't got it. That's all. That's it. If they say no, you're under no obligation to do anything. You're not to say anything. I mean, obviously you cooperate if they need like license, registration, or if you get pulled over and whatever. But if they don't have a warrant and you're not being arrested, you are not obligated to give them anything. You are not obligated to do anything but say, "I'm pleading the fifth. I want my lawyer." That's all you got to do. Now, getting back to the main point, back to the Freddie Gray case. We know from a lot of the information that's come out since then that there was no legal pretense for him to be arrested. A lot of the pundits and analysts and experts on all the networks have been saying they had a legal precedent. But the fact of the matter is, the cause of his arrest, there was no legal justification for that. They didn't find the switchblade until after he had been arrested. A switchblade that of course, was proven to have been legally allowed in the state of Maryland. But anyway, yeah. Another case, we're going to move on to another case. Mike Brown. The case that started the whole Black Lives Movement phenomenon. Really is something else. And this is exactly why I started the video with the Glory sound video. Whew, man. Honestly, I don't think we're ever going to know what the truth was. I'm gonna just say it like that. One thing that both Ferguson and Baltimore do have in common is, in both cases, there were riots. And in the case of Ferguson, of course, there was police brutality that was well documented by networks from around the world. There was a lot of stuff happened. Stuff happened. But let's just say that a lot of stuff that shouldn't happen happened in Ferguson. But in regards to the case itself, that kicked off the whole Black Lives movement, the whole Black Lives Matter movement. Excuse me. So apparently, and this is going by video surveillance and independent interviews and so forth and so on, and all that stuff. And I know I know it sounds like I'm making light of a serious situation, but on the one hand, this is some very heavy shit that I'm going into and all that. So please bear with me. I'm not trying to take this lightly, but anyway. So apparently, Mike Brown and Dorian Jones, his friend, who, by the way, was recently arrested under very sketchy circumstances, or I should say rearrested under very sketchy circumstances, were involved in a quote-unquote strong arm robbery, which basically means no weapon was involved. When there was a robbery, but there was no weapon involved. That's basically what it means. So, Ferguson police were called. The officer involved, I'm not going to say his name, protect his privacy, since it's been announced that he's not going to be charged and all that, etc., etc. But anyway, officers were called. The officer that shot him caught up to him. And this is where shit gets really, really murky. I mean, on the one hand, I'm going to interject there and say, if there were like 50 plus witnesses, I don't think that their testimony should be dismissed because they feel because of how they feel, because of how they feel, because of regardless of how they feel, whether or not they felt their sense of force was at play or not. I think that's indisputable. Their testimony should not have been dismissed. On the other hand, there is the obvious either A, a false memory where someone remembers something that didn't happen, or B, you interview multiple people, you interview 30, 40, 50 people, and you get 30, 40, 50 completely different testimonies. It happens. Perspective is everything. Context is everything. But what it is indisputable is the fact that Mike Brown wasn't armed, and if there's as this video that has suddenly become hugely popular as really touches on.
You can put your hands down, Jazz.
No way. Dude's got a gun. Next thing you know, I got 6 warning shots in my back.
Jazz.
Okay. I'm putting my hands down now.
Yeah, if there's someone that is either sitting or sitting next to you with a loaded gun, it would be very unusual for you to not be a little nervous, unless you have a background in law enforcement or military yourself, or in being in a war zone. You would not be wrong to feel just a little nervous. So, anyway, the confrontation between Mike Brown and the officer involved, it's very murky. We don't know. Some people say that he was running. Some people say that there was a struggle. Some people say there was reaching and all that shit and all that. And we don't, honestly, I don't think we'll ever know. The fact of the matter is, boom, Mike Brown gets killed. His body is left in the middle of the street for several hours. Family tries to come and identify his body. Police keep him back. Shit is the fan. Then you have the whole explosion. Black Lives Matter is born. Now we're going to go on to the third case. The case in New York. Eric Jones. I can't remember his last name, but the famous case in New York City. An African-American man is selling single cigarettes. He's confronted by law enforcement. Cops jump all over him and strangle him to death. The guy says before he passes out, before he loses consciousness, he can't breathe, saying that he has asthma. That's revealed during the autopsy. Outrage in New York City. I believe his name is Eric Garner. I believe his last name is Garner. But, yeah. I know that in the case of both Freddie Gray and Eric Garner, the person that was detained was not a threat to law enforcement. So, in my book, in my opinion, in those two cases, excessive force was used. And of course, since they're all dead, unfortunately, we will never know. We will never hear that side of the story. In the case of Mike Brown, my opinion is inconclusive because we just won't know. Mike Brown's dead, and all we have law enforcement, and a lot of emotional witnesses' testimonies to go on. And on that one, I do agree with the experts and the pundits. That's not enough. Like, unfortunately, Mike Brown is dead, so we'll never hear his side of the story. But anyway, yeah. As sort of a caveat to all that, I'm gonna speak this person's name, even though it's my policy on my blogs not to do it in these kinds of cases. The Trayvon Martin and Ed Mark Zimmerman case. I mean, the guy that everyone agrees is a fucking danger to not just everyone around him, but himself. He made the news yet again for being involved in a shooting. I mean, my opinion of Florida having some of the most fucked up laws and politics that justify these kinds of things aside, why won't the media just leave this guy alone, first of all? And second, why didn't the guy change his name and disappear? Is what it is. Anyway, part 2 of this video comes shortly.
Now the war is not over, victory isn't won, but we'll fight on to the finish, and then when it's all done, we'll cry glory, oh glory, oh, we'll cry glory, oh glory,
Selma is now for every man, woman, and child. Even Jesus got his crown in front of a crowd. They march with the torch, we gon' run with it now. Never look back, we done gone hundreds of miles. From dark roads, heroes, to become a hero. Facing the League of Justice, his power was the people. Enemy is lethal, a king became regal. Saw the face of Jim Crow under a bald ego. The biggest weapon is to stay peaceful. We sing, our music is the cuts that we bleed through. Somewhere in the dream we had an epiphany. Now we right the wrongs in history. No one can win a war individually. It take the wisdom of the elders and young people's energy. Welcome to the story we call victory. The coming of the Lord, my eyes have seen the glory.
one day, when the glory comes, it will be ours, it will be ours. Oh, one day, when the war is won, we will be sure, we will be sure. Oh, glory, when the war is won, when it's all said and done, we'll cry glory, oh glory.
So now we are back with part 2 of the whole Black Lives Matter movement thing. Black Lives Matter / All Lives Matter. Now, before I continue, I do want to say that I feel that it needs to be reminded that unlike the only other demographic in this country that even comes close to relating to the African American experience are Native Americans, and while I would easily argue that they had it worse, African Americans are the only demographic that came to this country against their will, number one. I mean, the slave trade was a billion-dollar industry back in the day, and this country was founded on the backs of African American slaves. Remember, slavery wasn't abolished until about 80 years after the founding of the United States of America. The Declaration of Independence was signed in 1976, yes, but the country was founded in 1783. So, yeah, when I say 80, 90 years, that's what I'm referring to. The country itself was formed in 1783. Yeah, America took its time. America has a thing about doing the right thing. It's very slow about it, and this is not up for debate. It's the history is very clear about that. It waited until the Civil War to free the slave to give African American slaves their freedom. Number one. Then it waited another 100 years to give African Americans the right to vote. Even the military was segregated until World War II, when it was proven in both valor and in cooperation that African American servicemen were just as reliable, could do the work just as well as their white counterparts. That is a fact. Because of a lot of there is racism in America even today. No one disputes that. It's a fact. I don't remember if it was Bobby Jindal or it was either Bobby Jindal or Rand Paul that said, and I quote, "I don't like the idea. Everyone has a right to be a bigot." I mean, agree to disagree, but he's right. Everyone does have a right to be a bigot if they want to. The problem is giving people the legal right to discriminate, not just in regards to race, and not just in regards to gender identity and sexual orientation, but I mean in general. It is unethical, and it is unethical for discrimination of any kind to be allowed by any government in this country or in any other country in the world, and that is what we as a humanity need to stand in opposition of. I mean, while Americans like to talk about what people are doing over there, America is home to a lot of well-known hate groups. I mean, check the shit that happened yesterday in Phoenix, where you literally have what I would call real-life trolls that would go in front of a mosque with T-shirts that say "fuck Islam" and telling people to bring guns for the sole purpose, and they under the guise of free speech and promoting free speech for the sole purpose of provoking a confrontation, so they can turn around and say, all Muslims are terrorists, all Muslims are evil, all Muslims are all about violence. And you know, that's just a separate video podcast, a separate blog/video podcast in and of itself. But anyway, getting back to the whole Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, all movement, this should be not just a bipartisan issue that should be priority number 2 after education. But all lives matter. I think is more important because all lives do matter. I mean, and I do excuse me. Should probably do that first. In terms of the whole Black Lives Matter thing, all lives matter is I think is far more important. I mean, on the one hand, it's great that we're talking about a lot of the injustices that the African American community has been dealing with since forever, pretty much. And while yes, I will be the first to admit, due to the statute of limitations, we're not going to see reparations from 400 years of slavery, from who knows how many centuries of slavery. That just ain't realistic. It ain't going to happen. But on the other hand, you know, the African American community needs to move the fuck on just as much as the rest of the country. I'm just going to put it like that. We're so focused on the past that we're unable to look into the future. We're in a time where we are in a time where you have so many opportunities that we legally could not have access to just 50 years ago. And if that doesn't say something, I don't know what will. That's why I'm a much bigger supporter of all lives matter, not just Black Lives Matter, because there's a lot of shit that gets encouraged when you talk focus squarely on Black Lives Matter. So I'm of the mindset all lives matter, period. I mean, while I did grow up surrounded by adults that dealt with that shit during the 60s and 70s, I like to say that I'm of the mindset of not not painting, blaming a whole group of people, of not treating people the way my parents and my aunts and uncles might. I mean, they've had to deal with some shit that I wouldn't wish on anybody, to be brutally honest. But you know, that happened 40, 50 years ago. I'm not saying it never happened, but that hasn't been my experience, and I think that's what needs to be focused on. That hasn't been my experience. I mean, at the same time, I'm not saying that discrimination and all that, and intimidation and shit like that doesn't happen now. It certainly does, but as I said in a blog post a couple weeks ago, I have had brushes with law enforcement over the years, but I've had brushes with law enforcement over the years, but never once that I feel like my life was in danger. I'm gonna put it that way. I mean, I think when you start to say that because you're black, you're guaranteed to be. I think when you start saying because you're black, you're pretty much guaranteed to get treated a certain way by law enforcement. That sets a very dangerous precedent, and it's a very dangerous and to be honest, unhealthy mindset to have it in and of itself. So, yeah. I think one thing that definitely will help is to have more African American and other minority people getting into law enforcement. That definitely will help. And while I do disagree with some pundits, in terms of because they are looking at it from both sides, even though it may not appear about it. On the other hand, I also feel that just context is everything. There was a video that CNN covered for 48 straight hours between Thursday and Friday of last week about a pregnant an 8-month pregnant African American woman that was pushed to the ground and handcuffed. It's an 11-minute video. I've seen the video. I've read witness statements. I mean, when CNN and all these other networks recap that, they only show the actual confrontation between her and law enforcement. But was excessive force used? Absolutely. That shouldn't have happened at all. And the pundits, I don't know where CNN and Fox News find these people. It's like they purposely go and find people whose sole purpose is to argue, or so extremely in one direction. But anyway, we know in that case, there's no question there was excessive force. But the one thing that you have to be careful about, and I am going to dedicate an entire video to what I like to call keeping CNN honest, and I've promised this for a while, but I am going to do it very soon. But anyway, one thing you need to be honest is when you see like these news briefs and video reports. Oh, this happened. Be aware that they're not giving you the full. You're not going to get the full context just from that. They're not going to give you the full story. Never take what you see on the news at face value. There are always at least two sides to every story. Always, sometimes three, sometimes more, and so on. But there's always at least two sides to every story. You need to hear at least two sides before you can start to gain a broader, before you can start to get the full understanding of what's going on. In that particular case, there's no question excessive force was going on. The other instance that I've mentioned in the first video involving Mike Brown. The reason that thing is getting murky is there are conflicting reports. He ran away. He tried to reach for the officer's gun. I don't think we'll ever know. Honestly, I don't think we'll ever know. Same thing with what happened with Trayvon Martin and Mark Zimmerman. I mean, some people say that he was being followed. The facts state that Mark Zimmerman followed Trayvon Martin. That one disputes that. Some people say the confrontation happened because he was being followed. Some people say Mark Zimmerman says that he shot him because he felt threatened, despite the fact he was following for no fucking reason. But anyway, that's a separate issue in and of itself. But I mean, two different instances with different perspectives. That's something that should not be dismissed. But anyway, just to put this whole just TLDR or too long didn't watch, or I should say TLDW, too long didn't watch for both my videos. All lives matter, first and foremost. Law enforcement should be considered an ally first and foremost, and should not be demonized in the court of public opinion, which in itself is very murky. That's number two. Number three, all these efforts from both the left, I'm left-handed, this is my left hand, and the right, this is my right hand. All these forces from both of those ends that are trying to are not helping the situation at all. I mean, you have one side saying, "Oh, cops should give people the benefit of the doubt," and like the whole leftist. I mean, there's some parts of the left that I'm okay with, and some parts of the right that I'm okay with, but this whole all cops are bad and cops should give black people the benefit of the doubt. Like, oh, don't just assume that they're dangerous and shit. Like, anyone that's either worked in law enforcement or done military service overseas will fucking tell you. You can't make that assumption. It's a split second between life and death. I'm not saying these killings are justified, but you're not wrong. I don't think you're wrong to be in fear of your life, period. But at the same time, and this is something that I know that the Boston police do as well, is number one, they don't assume, and number two, they go out of their way to avoid being in that position, period. You don't hear about this shit happening in Boston. You don't. You just don't. And if something does happen, after this video is posted, I stand corrected. But as of right now, I haven't heard about this stuff happening in Boston in over 20 years now. It's been over 20 years since we've had anything close to this going on in Boston. At the time I recorded the rest of this video, the events of what happened in Boston this past Monday didn't happen yet. That said, I stand by what I just said. So, yeah. The rest of what I've got is for the rest of my opinion on this. See the rest of the video. Because they see what's going on all over the country, and they're being proactive about how they approach certain situations and certain arrests. I mean, someone's getting pulled over. Cop waits in the car. They call for backup, and make sure at least if they're by themselves, they call for backup. They call either the precinct or state police, just so that they're never alone. Just to make sure that they're never alone whenever they pull someone over. They need to make an arrest or execute a search warrant. They go in pairs, or they go in a group of 3 or more, just for the sake of safety and also for the sake of transparency, so that so it doesn't become a whole he said she said kind of thing, you know. But yeah, all lives matter, period. I mean, it's not that hard to look and see that white people have been victimized by the police as well. Not just poor white people either, but white people in general have been victimized by the police as well, excessive force, etc., etc. Why aren't we talking about them either? I mean, I'm not saying that trivializes the way black people have been treated, but the only reason we're talking about that is because that's what people are choosing to talk about. That's what we're choosing to focus on. But, like I said in the first video, and like I said at the beginning of this one, there's 2 sides to every story. So anyway, these 2 videos are going to be on the subject. I'm going to refer back to them again and again and again and again and again. So, yeah, I hope I don't have to redo these videos because I'm worried about an audio and video being out of sync by a split second or 2. But shit, I've talked on this for like 30 minutes now, and I'm pretty much done. Whew. So anyway, yeah. So you guys, whether if you're an American, I hope you take my words to heart. If you're from out of the country, we're not all crazy. We just think we are. And please don't judge the whole of this country by a handful of personalities, because that's just not cool. Believe it or not, most Americans think very highly of those from outside of our borders. And yeah, I know I just messed that up. But anyway, no matter where you are in the world, take care of yourselves, and we'll see you in another video sometime soon. And now we are in part 3 of this video. Um, Honestly, I never thought that I would have video clips from almost a year apart in the same video, but thanks to the magic of video editing, it's now possible. And that also, as of right now, makes this the longest video I have ever put together. And so, yeah. I do want to go back and touch on a few things that I covered in the old footage, as I'm calling it now, or rather in part 2. In the context of the All Lives Matter movement, or I should say All Lives Matter mantra that came up pretty much in defiance of the Black Lives Matter movement. I did a bit of research since I recorded those first 2 video clips, and unsurprisingly, I discovered it was actually code for White Lives Matter. And it's interesting to note that it is interesting to note that a lot of people that are saying and chanting All Lives Matter don't understand the context in which it was presented, whereas it's code for only White Lives Matter. And when I said in my previous in part 2 of this video clip that All Lives Matter, I meant that literally, all lives matter. But the problem is, in this country, that hasn't been the case almost pretty much since before its founding. At the time this country was created, the only lives that mattered were white men's lives. Women didn't get the right to vote until about 100 years ago. Blacks didn't get the right to vote until the 1960s. Native Americans, this country likes to pretend that the shit that they did didn't happen and all that. So yeah. It's also interesting and very important, I feel, to just remind folks that there is one demographic in this country that can legally kill you simply because it's because they can, and that is law enforcement. They can kill you for any or no reason at all. All they have to do is claim self-defense, and it doesn't really matter what the investigation really uncovers, unless it's, I mean, except for that one case that I know of that was highly publicized before the South Carolina mass shooting. That it happened like a couple months before that, where it was pretty obvious, and even CNN and so on admitted if that video footage if that bystander, thank goodness, hadn't recorded what happened, we would have never known that this cop just killed a man just because. I feel it's very important to put. That's one of the things I was alluding to when I said at the end of the last video clip. It's not just black people that are getting that can get killed just for being black. African American, law enforcement are the only demographic in this country that has a legal right to kill you for any or no reason, and that is something that needs to be kept mindful of. In part because no one likes to think that no one really likes to think that officers will lie, and that's a problem in this country, that certain members of the law enforcement community and their supporters, many of which are pundits on CNN, either don't care about because they're actually racist, or they don't care about, or they just are just plain ignorant. I'm just put it like that. I mean, and by the way, that's water. I mean, just think about it. Whenever soldiers have collateral damage when they're out in the field, there's always an investigation. I mean, it's kind of crazy where soldiers have people complained about soldiers being under scrutiny during the so-called war on terrorism. Yet there is no such red tape for law enforcement. A lot of it is because, on the one hand, I do agree that law enforcement should have the benefit of the doubt in certain circumstances, but I also agree with a lot of families of those that have been wrongfully killed, and I'm going to use the quotes. I'm going to explain why I did that in a minute. I also agree with the families of those that have been killed by cops. That after they have the hearing and investigation, it's dismissed as it was the deceased's fault. The interesting thing is the reason I did this is because you're only really hearing that in 9 out of 10 times in instances where the deceased is African American. That's pretty much it. I mean, let's go back to what happened after the South Carolina mass shooting in that historically African American church. What happened when they found the guy responsible? They paraded him out in full body armor. Now let's go to another interesting case that got a lot of big attention the year before that, in which I'm trying to remember. I don't remember the specifics. It was either Minnesota or Arizona where a cop went rogue and pretty much challenged his former colleagues to come after him. The guy ended up holding himself up in a cabin somewhere in the middle of the woods, set the cabin on the fire, taking himself with it. The guy responsible for the Carolina shooting, I know his name, but unlike CNN, I'm actually not going to give him his name, that airtime and all that stuff. But they paraded the guy out, and as I discussed in a previous blog, the guy literally said he did what he did because he wanted to start a race war. Why did he want to start a race war? Because racism never died in this country, first and foremost. I mean, yeah, there's bigots in this country. No, that's nothing new. But the problem is state-sponsored racism in this country is what, unfortunately, certain personalities want to bring back. I'm not getting into a certain presidential candidate, which I'm gonna talk about almost exclusively in another blog. I mean, in another video blog. But yeah, this country's got a race problem that, contrary to what a lot of people may think, never really resolved itself. So yeah, it really is something else. Getting back to the Black Lives Matter / All Lives Matter, Fox News personality Bill O'Reilly stated sometime last year that he was going to make it his personal mission to destroy the Black Lives Matter movement. Interesting choice of words. But I don't think anyone was really surprised to hear him say that, considering Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN have all historically supported one extreme political faction or another. I mean, I talk about this in a bit more detail in my keeping CNN honest blog, which, by the way, I finished so long time ago, but I haven't uploaded yet. But anyway, I'm getting a bit off track. So basically, and I'm pretty sure this goes without saying, whenever black people do dumb shit, the media decides to focus on that. In short, but as a lot of people have started pointing out a lot during President Obama's second term, a lot of the people that have been responsible for all these mass killings and shit like that have been white men. Yet the media and law enforcement chooses to write them off as mentally ill, even though it's pretty obvious that these guys are not quote unquote mentally ill. I mean, even if they actually are, they were not mentally ill at the time they committed these acts of mass violence. I mean, we live in a country where, literally, because of your skin color, you do get preferential treatment. If your skin color is mine, or slightly lighter, or slightly darker, and you commit and even just having that appearance, more often than not, you're perceived as either a thug or a terrorist, one or the other. A lot of that has to do with mass media, which I'm going to talk about in a lot more detail in another video blog that I'm going to call America's Obsession with Death and Guns. It's going to be a pretty interesting watch when I get into that, but yeah. Race does play a role in terms of how folks are treated by law enforcement, whether folks want to admit it or not. The data exists to back up what I just said. Feel free to Google it. In every district in America, race does play a factor in terms of how folks are treated by law enforcement. Even black cops treat black suspects differently from how the same black cop would treat a white suspect. It's completely different. The data exists, and the Law Enforcement Association is very open about that. Like I said at the beginning of this clip, law enforcement is the only demographic in this country that can literally kill someone, that can legally kill someone for any or no reason at all. Do I think it's okay? Absolutely not. Do they think it's okay? That's debatable. Of course, I shouldn't say of course, but unfortunately, it really depends on the officer in question. I mean, like I said before, like I said in the previous video clip, most cops are good, honest working folks who just want to be able to go home to their families at night. I mean, and this is something that the media has done a pretty great job of desensitizing the masses to. But most people that kill people, most individuals that kill someone, whether they're cops or military or whatever, they're sick to their stomach right after they do it. I'm talking most people. Anyone that can kill someone and feel absolutely nothing afterwards, well, I don't know what to say to that. I honestly don't. But having the legal power to take someone else's life isn't something that should be taken lightly. And I feel like with some folks, specifically those who are either A, ex-military who get into law enforcement, or B, folks who have dealt with one too many stressful situations than they deserved and just have a meltdown on the job. I feel like there are certain people that definitely should not be allowed to should not be allowed to be in that position at all. I mean, it's pretty hard. I mean, you really can't generalize these kinds of things, but unfortunately, I feel like there's been both that going on, and then you have a whole lot of other factors that are playing in what's become an epidemic. I'm going to talk about this a bit more in a separate video, but it's worth noting that so far in 2016, more people have been more people have been shot or killed by either toddlers or quote responsible gun owners than they have by criminals and terrorists. So that's some food for thought. I mean, a lot of I'm just gonna save the rest of that for that separate video, but yeah, it's interesting. I figured I might as well just make this part 3 and just make this a super long video now, since that way I don't have to make another video to supplement it, because that would have just been awkward. So yeah. Wow, I still can't believe I made this video go on for pretty much an hour. It's pretty impressive, but yeah. Don't worry, there's not going to be a natural video. I mean, actually, that reminds me, speaking of the music video that I included in the first 2 parts of this clip, so there are some people that took issue with the fact that Glory by Common and John Legend mentions what happened in Ferguson and Rosa Parks in the same sentence. There is a connection. That was done on purpose. Common and John Legend have been pretty candid and open about wanting to champion civil rights and pretty much wanting to be real. That's what I'm trying to say. They're not going to try to sugarcoat things like the media and like history books have been doing have been going out of their way to do. They're just being real. I feel like it's at the point now, unfortunately, now where you have to say some shit that'll offend some people in order to get your point across. Because clearly, trying to dance around the issue and be nice about it, clearly that isn't working. So, yeah, they are related. Civil protest of civil disobedience. I mean, it's like I said in a couple of blog posts regarding civil rights and all that. Martin Luther King once said, "Riots are the voice of the unheard." Do I think a lot of assholes burning down a CVS in Baltimore last year was okay? Of course not. But I'm just saying, the aftermath of what happened after Freddie Gray was killed. And by the way, his name was George Zimmerman. I fucked that up. I'll admit that. So that's the other reason that I'm making this one video. But anyway, riots are the voice of the unheard, and I feel it's very important to say that, especially with today's political climate. I honestly, a lot of people are not going to like this, but I'm gonna just say it like this: regardless of the outcome of the presidential election, there's going to be some violence in this country. That's not a prediction. That's not me wishing bad things on this country or anybody. I'm just saying the writing's on the wall is what's going to happen. Whether or not it's Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders or a surprise candidate that jumps into the race after the conventions happen. I'm just saying, regardless of the outcome of the presidential election, there's going to be some violence in this country. And a lot of the shit that we've been seeing over the last, let's say, 16 years now, that's gonna look like nothing in comparison to what's coming. So yeah, it's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of uncertainty in this country to look forward to. I mean, it doesn't matter what your belief is, whether it religiously, philosophically, or whatever, but you shouldn't ignore the things that are going on around you. I'm gonna just put it like that. And why we live in a country where free speech is the shit and all that. Free speech is for everybody. Freedom of religion is for everybody. You can't say fuck Muslims, yet say I love Jesus. You really can't. It just doesn't work that way. You can't infringe on one religion without infringing on the other. Same goes if you don't believe in anything. I mean, I will admit that. I mean, actually, let me scratch that. A lot of atheists and a lot of quote-unquote non-believers have been putting up with a lot of the shit that religious people have been spewing over the last 16 years in particular, and probably a lot longer than that. And it's pretty obvious with a lot of the things that the media is underreporting in recent years that they've had it with that, and they're ready to move in and take over. Well, actually, I shouldn't put it that way, but they're just tired of being ignored. But freedom of religion doesn't just mean you have free to practice your religion as long as it doesn't violate the civil rights of someone else. It also means you don't have a right to force your religion on someone else. And I know this sounds a little bit off topic, but it is related to everything else that I covered in this video clip, as well as the previous parts 1 and 2 of this video. They are related, and I'm gonna talk about that a bit more in a couple extra videos. But I just felt it really important to say that just make sure to include that in at the end of this one. So at the very beginning of this, I included a short video clip. But you know what? Never mind. I'm gonna just save that for another video. This video is going on for almost an hour and a half. So yeah, I'm gonna go on to the next video that I'm recording, and we'll pick up the conversation from there.